Marketplace. This webinar, I'm going to walk through the Pcard reconciliation and approval process in Team Georgia Marketplace. Hopefully all of you that are reconcilers or card holders or your supervisors, which means your approvers, have taken the training class online and taken the class and passed the test and gotten your PeopleSoft user ID. And so what I'm going to walk through today is basically a recap of all of the training materials that you've received that are for the class that you took. And also I'm going to walk through and show you, or I'm going to send you after this webinar, links and quick reference guides, which will walk you through step by step on how to do some of the things that I'm going to show you today. So we're going to jump in, and I'm going to be in a training environment to do the Pcard reconciliation and approval today, and then I will also log in a little while into the production environment, just so that where your actual transactions have been loaded for your January 4th statement, and so all of your transactions for January the 4th, and then the transactions for your February 4th statement that are still continuing to load on a daily basis. Just so you know, so when you go out and use your card and purchase something, we receive those transactions on a daily basis. So if you made a charge today, it would post to Bank of America or tomorrow, and then we would receive it the following day, and we load those transactions into the PeopleSoft application every morning around, usually it's between 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning. The transactions that have posted the previous day are loaded into PeopleSoft. And so as we go through this webinar, I will pause to take some questions. You should see the questions box where you can pose questions to me, and then I'll go and take some breaks and read through those questions and check and see if I've answered your question or not. Each of you, so this is the Technical College, just a webinar just for Savannah Technical College, and you have a lot of questions today about your particular process and things you need to do. I'll try to answer those. If I cannot, then I will pose them to your procurement and your Pcard administrator at the Technical College and see if we can get them to answer your questions as well. So again, the first thing I'm going to do is just log into a training environment and set up my pagelet that's going to show me my cards that are ready for me to do the reconciliation process on. Go ahead and log into the system. And so when I'm on the PeopleSoft homepage, so this is the first thing is that you want to do when you want to start doing your Pcard reconciliation is go and add what's called your pagelet to your homepage. And so this pagelet will show you basically all of the transactions that are ready for you to attach and to change the status on, to put your attachments for your receipts onto the transaction. So this is one-time setup that you'll need to do. So in the top left corner, you'll click on the Content button, and you'll notice on the right-hand side there are these TGM pagelets, and there's two that are for there's one for reconcilers and one for approvers. So if you're a card holder or also what's called a reconciler, you'll select the one called Pcard Stage Charges. So when we load transactions into the system, they are loaded with in a stage status. And as a reconciler, you will change them once you've attached your receipts to the transaction and validated that, make sure your budget combinations are correct. Some of you will do that. Some of you you already have defaults in for what your budget's going to be, and your accounting staff is actually going to be the ones that code the accounts, but some of you have multiple departments and fund sources and things like that, so you'll be doing your own coding on your transactions, but I'm going to show you how to do that. But you'll as a reconciler, you'll be concerned with your staged transactions, and then as an approver, you'll add the pagelet called Pcard verified charges. But right now I'm just going to add the pagelet called Pcard stage charges. So I select that box, and then I click on the personalized layout. And what I like to do is, you'll notice when you log into PeopleSoft, you have your menu on the left side, and then in the middle you have your news and announcements. I like to make mine 3 columns, which adds another column over to the right. So if you left the pagelet, it would be down at the bottom of your menu. So I like to take it, click on it, and then use the arrows to move it first to the middle and then to the right column. And so that way, each time I log into PeopleSoft, basically this is a report, or what PeopleSoft calls a query. It'll be on your home page. And so I've got this query or this pagelet on the right-hand side, and I just click on Save. And so if you've already got transactions for January and February, you use your card and you go and add this pagelet, then you'll already see your transactions that are sitting out there for you to load. There are a couple cards that we still got to put into the system, but all the cards should be there in the next couple of days. The majority of all the cards for Savannah Tech have been loaded into the system. So you'll notice when this pagelet comes up, and again, this is just in a training environment, but I can see it's called the Pcard stage charges, and I can see that first in this column, this has the cardholder's employee ID, so you should see your employee ID, and then your name, last 5 digits of your card number, the date the transaction was made. This is your billing date that this is in. So these transactions, they have a bill. This user has a billing date of the 27th. Yours will be always the 4th of the month. Tells you who the merchant was, who the purchase was made with, and the amount of the charge. Also, you'll see that this has a dispute amount. I'll show you how to do disputes during this. And currently, there's no description on this particular purchase, but I'm going to put one in. And then you'll see out to the right a column for the transaction number. And so this is the unique transaction number. So every transaction, every time you make a charge, it gets a unique number that's a real large number that's in this column. So if I've gone to Home Depot and bought something, and I've got a scanned copy of my receipt, then all I'll need to do is from this pagelet, instead of having to use my navigation, and I'm going to show you how to use the navigation in a minute, but I can just click on that particular transaction. It will launch a new window of PeopleSoft and bring up just that particular transaction. So you'll notice that it's automatically done my menu navigation down to the reconciliation page for me. Go ahead and just open up this page. Okay, so this page has on it the excuse me, just one second. I want to make sure that I get that I can see all of the transactions. Excuse me. At the top, when I pull up the transaction, you'll notice at the top of the screen, I can see my employee ID. I can see whether or not this transaction was linked to a purchase order, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. This is the selection for the line if I want to go look at other or perform an action on this transaction. You'll know I've got my amount. If I click on this line details, this is where I can go and see some more detail about this particular type of transaction. For example, Home Depot, they provide what's called line item detail, which means it's a type 7 detail. So they actually send in their Pcard information exactly what was purchased. For example, this was a hose. This was a water hose that was purchased at Home Depot. Okay, and so if there were multiple things bought at Home Depot, they would all be listed here. Not all of your merchants will provide that level of detail on your Pcard transactions. So I'm just going to return back to the page. You'll see the card number, which will be masked out. It'll display the last 5 digits of the card number. This is the date the transaction happened. The merchant, currently it's in a stage status. And in this comments bubble, this is where you'll go to add the scanned copy of your receipt. Okay? So you'll click on, so when you're ready to add your receipt, when you've got your receipt for your purchase, you click on the comment bubble. And I'm just going to put in a comment that says, attached receipt. And then I just go out and I click on attach, and I find the scanned copy of my receipt. We recommend that when you scan your receipts, that you do them as JPEGs or as PDFs, and don't do them as TIFFs, which have a large, or bitmaps that have a large file size. So try to do PDFs and JPEGs just to make sure that your file size is small. So you'll go out and find the scanned copy of the receipt. I've got it on a folder. Just open it up and upload it. And so that's just going to bring it from your computer and load it up into the PeopleSoft application. Okay, if I want to view a copy of that receipt, I just click on View. And it'll download the file. So this is just a scanned copy of the receipt. Okay. So with attachments, you'll see all of your attachments down here. If you have multiple attachments, you just add a row and upload another attachment. Okay. Once you've got your attachment in, you just say OK. And you'll notice that since I've put comments in, now the comments bubble has blue dots in it. Okay. As you're going through this, a lot of times it's fine to just go ahead and click on Save, which just saves the transaction. Make sure that what you've uploaded or what you've typed in, it has saved into PeopleSoft. And also, I want to go and I want to take a look at the distributions for this, or where it's going to hit the budget. Okay, so every card holder has a default set of what are called in PeopleSoft called chart fields. So if I click on these distributions and open them up, this is my list of my default chart fields. So you'll see yours, of course, will be different, the accounts and the funds department, fund source programs. But at any time you need to make a change to that, you can come to this page and key it in. If you needed to split the charge across multiple departments, let's say a 50-50 split, you would just change this percentage to 50% and then add a row. And it would copy the chart fields down, and you just key in what the budget combination would be for that second row. So once you've changed the distributions, if that's required by your agency, I know some of you, again, I'll repeat it. Some of you, all of you have default set of chart fields. Some of you that will never change. Your accounting department is going to code your transactions to the correct account, but then some of you know your budget. You know where you want the purchase to come out of your budget, so you'll go into that distribution link and code it to the correct budget. And once you have done your attachment and coded it to the budget, then you can click on the billing tab, and you just want to put in a description of your purchase. For example, this was a water hose. Okay. You then want to change the status from staged, and as a card holder, you will only see staged or verified in this list. So you'll change it from staged to verified, and then click on Save. Then when you go back to your home page, I'm going to go ahead and just close this window down. You'll notice that right now the transaction's still on there but it went from staged to verified. If I refresh the pagelet, that transaction moves off my list, or it moves off the pagelet that I have. So are there any questions about how to take a charge and do the reconciliation, do the attachments or anything? And I'll go out and look at the question. And again, you will get quick reference guides on how to walk through these processes, or how to walk through these steps. Okay, so that transaction, Home Depot, is a transaction where I just went and used my card at the store. We call it a face-to-face purchase. Okay, there are going to be purchases that are done through Team Georgia Marketplace where a purchase order was issued when this purchase was made. Okay, so for example, I've got in my list, I've got this transaction for Staples for $129.74. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just click on that transaction. And I'm going to show you how to link this transaction to a purchase order. So one of the things when you order through Team Georgia Marketplace and a PO gets sent out to the supplier to make your purchase, on the packing slip or the invoice that they send with the items, they include they'll include the PO number that goes along with that purchase. We've been doing this with Office Max, Staples, Grainger, Fisher. We've been doing this for a while with them, and they'll include on there your 5-digit business unit, which for you guys is 84100, period, and then the 10-digit PO number. So this transaction is for $129.74. It's a Staples purchase, and one of the things that I like to go in and take a look is at the line details. And so for this Staples purchase, you'll notice that this was some toner and some cartridge. Okay, and they also provide Staples, Office Max, a lot of the suppliers. They actually have this field called customer code /CRI. They'll include the PO number as a reference on this transaction as well. Again, I'd have my packing slip that would show the PO number, but I like to sometimes come to this under this type 5 in this customer code field and see the full and find the PO number. So I want to take this transaction, and because a purchase order has been issued, I have to link this transaction to the PO. Sometimes you'll pull up this transaction, and if it was for an exact amount, you would already see in this PO number field and this line number field, the transaction would already be linked to the PO and the line number, and you wouldn't need to take any action as far as linking it. You would just set it you would just do your attachment and set it from stage to verified. But let's say, for example, that your PO was for $131, but your price ended up coming in at $129.74. The system will not automatically match against that purchase order because it was not an exact match, and it'll be your responsibility to link this transaction to the PO and also to the line number. So I'm going to go ahead and I've got the line selected, and this is just a one line. There's a quick reference guide on how to split out a transaction, but basically you take the line and you click split line, and you walk through. You enter how much is for each line. Like if it was $50 for the first line, you do 50 and then a plus, and it would just then keep adding the lines. Okay, but in our example, we've got one that's it's just a one-line PO. But again, there's a quick reference guide that walks you through how to split a transaction. So I'm going to take this transaction and click on the purchase details. And I'm going to do, if I know my 10-digit PO number, I could just type it in, or I can do a lookup. And so when I do a lookup on this, it will bring me a list of all of the POs that are paid with Pcard from this particular Pcard. Okay, so I won't see everybody's POs. I'll just see the ones that have been issued against my card. And I know because I have the packing slip and I saw it on the in the transaction detail page that this PO 141414 that was done on July the 26th to Staples is my PO. So I go ahead and select that, and then I can do a lookup on my line number as well. And so then in this line, I'll notice actually that this was a two-line PO. Okay, so the PO was issued for 2 lines. There were 2 different cartridges that were ordered. Well, they only shipped line 1, which was $129.74. I still have another charge somewhere else. They might have back ordered the other toner, and it's in a separate charge. Because of course the merchants are going to charge your card based off of what they ship. Okay, so this was a partial shipment. So I know that this is going to be PO line number 1 because it's $129.74, and then I just say OK. And when you link a transaction to a purchase order, it goes and takes the budget chart fields from the purchase order. So now, for example, if I click on my distributions for this transaction, all of my chart field combinations are grayed out because they've been pulled from the purchase order, because your PO has already been coded to where your purchase order needs to go against your budget. I'm just going to click OK. And again, I'll do the same thing as far as going out to my comment, putting in a comment, and then attaching a copy of the receipt. And I don't have one for this one, but I'm just going to upload another attachment to it. And then I'm going to come to my billing tab and put in a description, this is toner. Come back on the transaction tab, and I'll change my status. So one thing too as well is if you've got multiple transactions and you've coded them and you've done your attachments on multiple lines and you've got multiple transactions pulled up, all of the ones that you've got selected, you can either use your drop down to change the status, or if you have a lot selected, and this is really better for approvers, but you just hit the verify button and it changes all of those lines from stage to verified that you've got the checkbox next to. So I'm going to go ahead and just set that one to verified, and then I'll go ahead and hit save. And now I want to talk a little bit about the budget checking, or what's called the validate budget. So this validate budget process goes out, and you'll notice for this PO, because it's against a PO, the budget status goes to valid as soon as you link it to the PO. It doesn't need to go out and make sure that the budget, the chart fields on the budget are correct. But I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you on the Home Depot charge. I'm going to go find it, and we're going to run the budget validation on it, or I'm going to show you how to do it. So if I'm on this page and I want to go look at more transactions, I could either go back to my pagelet, or anytime I click on the search page is where I can go and pull up multiple transactions for my card or for other people's cards if you're in the case of being an approver. So for example, this is the search page. I could take out that transaction number and then I'm going to put in a card issuer of Visa. I want to see all of my transactions that are currently in a verified status. And I click OK. And so you can use this page if you know, you can narrow it down by the billing date. So if I only cared about the ones that are in a status of that are in this current period, or if they're in the other, or if I wanted another period as well, I would leave it. If I wanted multiple periods, I would just leave it blank. Take off for this employee because I want to look at the Home Depot one. So I want to see everything that I have access to that's in a verified status, and I just click OK. And while it's doing that, are there any other, let me look at my questions. See, one question says, if there are 10 receipts for one company, will these need to be scanned 10 times, or can all 10 be scanned together? You do one receipt per transaction. So you should not have a different receipt for a different transaction on the transaction that you're working on. So each transaction should have a unique receipt with it. The transactions are not by merchant, they're by the individual transaction. So you had the question, why would you want to use your Pcard if you can enter, excuse me, this happens every now and then in this conference room, somebody calls in. It says, why would you want to use your Pcard if you can enter chart field info in the comment section of TGM? Well, the Pcard is the payment method, different than the chart field combination. So I think I'm going to need a little better explanation for that question. Can you move a transaction from staged to verified if the account listed on the chart field is incorrect for the item purchased? Yeah, definitely. There's no code that says this is whatever you purchased, that it's coded correctly. That's up to the reconciler in your accounting department to compare what was purchased to what's coded. And then, Angela, you had a question about, I noticed that my receipt was not signed and dated. We want you to sign and date your transactions. So in my example, it didn't have it signed and dated, but you should sign and date the transactions that the receipts that you upload into the system. Okay, so I pulled up all of the questions. I pulled up all of my transactions that are currently set to a verified status, and I'm looking at these transactions, and you'll notice that I've got multiple transactions that are sitting out here for these two transactions that were for two transactions at one time, and I wanted to code them against the same budget combination. I can select both of them and click on this distribution template, in the whole combination that you want to use. The defaults are up on the transaction, but if you use the distribution template to kind of override what's already there, then you would have to key in every single one of the distributions, and it would overwrite just to click the distribution template. But again, you would have to code all of your budget combinations that are on this page. It basically just overrides what's on the transaction. Okay, you'll notice that I've got these transactions that are currently verified, and the budget status is not checked. You can run, I could run, for example, I could select all three of these lines and run the validate budget process on them. Or if I leave them in a verified or an approved status and not budget checked, then there's a batch process at night that will run the budget validation on these transactions. And all that will do when it runs is it makes sure that what is on the transaction is a valid combination. So it doesn't, meaning that there is a budget set up for that combination of fund source and department, for example. It does not hit your budget at all. So it doesn't expense the funds. It doesn't check to make sure that you have funds available for that. That's going to happen when the voucher gets built to pay it and the expenditure happens. So the validate budget process that runs in batch or that you can run online, that's just simply making sure that what is on the transaction is a valid budget combination. Any questions on the budget validation or anything else I've covered? Yes, we do want you to sign your Pcard receipts. Sign the receipts and date them before you scan them and put them in. These are not your card holders, Susan. This is a training. This is just a training environment. The data here is just in a training environment. So in this environment, Staples, a purchase order was issued for this transaction. The Home Depot was the example of going to the brick and mortar and using the card. What happens if the items do not pass the budget? Then they will not go over to AP. So each month, when you get all of your transactions approved and valid, you'll run them over to accounts payable, and you'll run some queries out of your procurement department or your AP department will run some queries to make sure all of the transactions are approved and valid. If they get into an error status, then somebody will have to go in there and code them and make sure code them to the correct budget combination. But they won't go over to AP until they have a valid status. Then we've got a question, is why would a receipt need to be signed if it's being scanned in from a designated IP address against a user-named account? Because that is the state purchasing audit requirements. Gail asked a question about how long should we keep the original receipt. That is something that you're going to, I'll get Sue and your team to take that question, how long you guys want them to keep the receipts, the original receipts. The DOAS's auditors are not required. If they've said if they're signed, scanned, and uploaded into PeopleSoft, they do not need to see a copy of it at state purchasing with DOAS, but you guys may have different feelings on that. Yes, there's a Sue, I'm going to run a query called the 0201B query once we get some transactions reconciled, so that you can see what's in that query, and you'll be able to see all of the transactions, the merchant, what their status is, and where they're coded against the budget, and if they're valid or not. You will be able to see all of your transactions. You can go back and pull up once the transactions are pulled over into the accounts payable department, they go to what's called a closed status, and you can use the search page to pull up closed transactions. So from this search page, one of your available options is statement status of closed, and you would probably want to do that for a particular employee or a particular billing date, and you run that search. That's how you can view all of your transactions that have already been processed. So they go from stage to verified, verified to approved, and then when they're run over into the accounts payable department, they go to a complete or closed status. So Audrey has replied back that they want to keep the paper receipts for 5 years and 20 years if it's purchased with bond money. And they're going to keep them in the business office. Or they said, we will keep them in the business office if you do not want to keep them. Okay, so I'm going to go on now. So that's basically how you do reconciliation, is you upload the attachments, make changes needed to the budget chart fields, and set them from stage to verified. And again, you'll notice on my home page, as I refresh, stage to verified. I'm going to go ahead and just take off this pagelet for stage transactions and show you what an approver or a supervisor who's responsible for making sure that they were valid purchases. So you'll also be in PeopleSoft. You'll click on the Content tab, and this is the one-time setup that you'll need to do. And you've got a pagelet that are called Pcard verified charges. So you'll select that pagelet, then click on the personalized layout. And again, I've already set mine to 3 columns. Yours will open up as 2 columns. But you'll want to set it to 3 columns, and then take the pagelet and move it over to the right side with the arrow, and then click on Save. So the transactions that previously I set from stage are now in a verified status, so they come up on this page. And so they show I've got 4 transactions that are out there waiting on my approval. If I click on the employee ID column, then that's going to open up all transactions for that employee, whether they're staged, verified, or approved. It's going to open up, it's going to launch the reconciliation page and show all transactions that are in there. Okay? So typically you're not going to, you don't want to click on the employee ID because it's not going to filter it out by particular transactions or ones just for that, just for the statement that you're currently working on. So I always like to just click on the transaction and have it launch another window. So you'll open up the transaction. And as an approver, you will really just make sure that they've put an attachment, that the attachment matches what the merchant that they bought from, that it was an approved purchase. Again, you'll notice that they come up to verified. If they forget a receipt or they they didn't split it out, or they needed to provide more detail that you need, as an approver, you have the ability to set it back to a stage status, okay? Or you can set it to approved if they've got everything. So a lot of times people will, if they forget a receipt or you've got a question on it, they'll set it back to staged and then put in a comment about why they put it back into a stage status. There aren't any email notifications or anything like that with the Pcard module, but you can use comments, or of course you could just call them or email them and let them know why you've put it back to a stage status. But if they've done everything that they need to for this particular transaction, and you'll just set it, it was in a verified status, you'll just set it from verified to approved, and then click on save. And then if you close the window, come back and refresh your pagelet, you'll notice it'll drop off your pagelet. And then you can just work the next transaction doing the same thing. If I wanted to see, for example, both of these transactions at the same time, the best way to do that would be to open up one of the transactions. And then use my search page to just search for verified transactions for the particular statement date. So if I have this one transaction open, and I said, well, I want to see the other one as well, I can just do my search. It's going to ask me if I want to proceed. I say yes. And in this search page, I could say, okay, for this particular employee, I want to see everything that is verified. And I do want to put this card issue or a visa. It does need this field in order to do the searches. I also have the ability, if I don't know their employee ID, I can do a lookup on their name, and I'm going to see everybody. I'll see their name in the list. And you may see someone's name in there twice. That's because they might have an old card. As they get new cards, you'll still be able to see the transactions that were against their old card number. You could just select their name and do OK. And so because I've got this employee and verified, I'm able to bring up the two different transactions. And so after I've checked to make sure, for example, this Amazon purchase is missing a receipt, so typically I wouldn't approve this transaction because it doesn't have a receipt with it. But if I wanted to to take both of them and say something was wrong with both of them. I could set them both back to stage by clicking the button, or I could approve both of them by clicking the approve button. So that's pretty much how you do the approval process. And then, so I'll check and see if there's any questions around that. And then I'm going to log into the production environment and run a couple queries so that you guys can see how to run queries, which are basically just reports of all of your Pcard transactions. I do have this webinar. I am recording the webinar, so I will send you the link to this webinar. Again, there are no email notifications for the Pcard module, so you will need to log into PeopleSoft and look at your pagelet to see if you have transactions that are ready for you to approve. Again, there are no email notifications, so when a transaction gets set back to staged, you'll see it back on your Pcard staged pagelet, or you would have to do that offline. Any other questions around Pcard reconciliation and approval? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and log out of this training environment. So the approver knows they have something to approve by putting this pagelet on their home page and logging into PeopleSoft. And they will see a list of the transactions that are in a verified status and ready for them to approve. All right, so I'm logged into our production environment, and again, not all of your cards have been loaded into PeopleSoft yet, but they will be in the next few days. But I wanted to show you a couple of queries that you can run to basically see a list of all of your transactions. So if I go into underneath the menu and I click on Reporting Tools, Query, and Query Manager, all of the Pcard queries, and queries, if you're not familiar with PeopleSoft, queries are just reports that you run. They're just a way for you to pull out data out of the system and run it out to Excel. But all of the queries begin with 0. All of the ones for the Pcard module begin with 0 PO2. So if I type in that and I click Search, this will bring up all of the Pcard queries that are out there. I have a lot of private queries that begin with that, but you'll just see the ones that are public. So a lot of the ones, for example, I'm going to, the most common ones that you'll run is this 0 PO201B Pcard status by VU detail. That one's run a lot, and you can take that query and make it one of your favorites so that it's up in your favorites list. If I take the query and I want to run it out, and yours is a little bit, I'm sorry, you'll actually go into Query Viewer. I apologize. You don't have Query Manager. You have Query Viewer. So it's going to prompt me for some, and the statement that I first want to look at is your January 4th statement. Okay, so I'm going to do the statement end date. So Visa actually put some of the transactions on the 3rd, And then in this field, if we want to see all the transactions, we just put in a wildcard for the percent. And then we click on View Results. And we'll open up this query in Excel. Of all the transactions that have currently loaded into the system. It will show you the current statuses. They're all staged. This, of course, is the billing date. This is the amount of the transaction. I do want to show you how to do disputes in just a second. This is that long transaction number, so you can use this query to go out and pull up a particular transaction. This, of course, is the merchant. This is of their card and where it's currently coded against. This query will get updated with the email address of the last person that modified it in case you needed to email them and ask them a question. This is the ship to that defaults onto the transactions. And then if the transaction's linked to a PO and a line, all of that's in there as well. It'll show you have a budget status of valid. And then we work with you on how to pull those transactions. That's loaded into PeopleSoft, 41,167.36. So I know that there are some cards that have not been put in. And make sure everybody has got all of their transactions for that particular statement reconciled and approved. So typically, disputes happen when you have a problem with the merchandise, or they've accidentally double billed you for one reason or another, and you are going to file a dispute with the merchant. So the dispute functionality within PeopleSoft is really just a way for you to track a transaction that you have put it in, that you filed a dispute with. We want to track to make sure that you get your credit if you're going to get one for that particular transaction, and you can track that in PeopleSoft in the transaction. So I'm just going to log in, and let's just say that this transaction from Amazon, we're going to dispute this charge. So I'm just going to click on the transaction, and it'll open it up in the reconciliation page. And I did want to point out while this is loading, you can get to this reconcile statement page just by navigating in the menu on the left-hand side by going to purchasing procurement cards, reconcile statement, or you can also go e-procurement. You can go e-procurement and then click on Procurement Card Center and then reconcile. So just different ways to get to the same page within PeopleSoft. So, but I clicked on the link, so it brought it straight. It just brought up the one transaction. But on the Billing tab, there is a field called Dispute Amount. So you would just put the amount that's in dispute. Okay, so if we wanted to dispute this entire transaction, 132.23, all we do is just put that amount in and then click on Save. And then there's navigation underneath Purchasing Procurement Cards, Reconcile, Review Disputes, where you'll see a list of everything that you've put in dispute. And then once you get the credit for that particular transaction, then you just click this Credit Collected. And then that just lets it know that you've got a credit, that your credit came through for that particular charge. If you ended up not getting the credit and you ended up owing for that charge, of course you would just come in here and delete out the amount that you put in dispute. Okay, so that's how you do dispute process in PeopleSoft. So it's really just a way to track your disputes in PeopleSoft. It's not, you still have to do the dispute process with the bank when you have a dispute. Are there any questions? We've run the full hour. Are there any other questions on Pcard reconciliation and approval? again, the webinar was recorded, and I've got an email that I will send to everyone that attended that has the quick reference guides with them, as well as the link to those same quick reference guides that are on the DOAS website. So there's another question that says, if you skip a step by accident, like let's say, for example, you forget to put an attachment or you forget to code the budget, it's going to let the cardholder set it to verified, and it would let the approver set it to approved. So part of the responsibility of the Pcard administrator is to make sure that that all the receipts are there and that everything was everything was done on the transaction. So there's nothing to keep someone from approving a transaction that doesn't have a receipt. But again, that would be against the policy of having a card. Same with the budget. Yes, they can approve any transaction, whether or not regardless of what the budget status is. Because it really just knows that it's a valid combination. But you could, if you see an approved transaction that's not budget checked, then you could just set it back to staged or set it back to verified and tell them to go and code it to where it needs to code. All right, well, thank you for your time today. Again, I will be sending you an email with those quick reference guides and the link onto to when this webinar gets loaded in. I'm actually going to go ahead and send the quick reference guide so you can go ahead and get started with your reconciliation and approval for your January 4th statement. If your transactions have not loaded yet, look for them today or look for them tomorrow, the next day. They should be in by the end of the week. And if you have questions, the first thing that you will do is contact your procurement office. They'll be able to help you with questions you have, and if they cannot answer your questions, they will bring them to us on our daily status call. So everyone have a good afternoon. Thank you.